So let's say you're creating a 3D prototype of the level for your game in Unity. You receive the package of models, or grey boxes, from your artist, so what's left for you to do is to assemble everything together. Not that complicated, is it? But the deadline is tomorrow. Things aren't that bad, the RCC got a modular, so you decide to use a SyncGrid to snap them to it. A perfect solution, but seriously, using Unity's default snapping system, I've got something better. So hey, this is Delft Compiler, and let's have a look at the magnificent package for Unity with the dynamically placed grid called ProGrids. Great, so first of all, let's install this package to our project. In order to do that, we will have to open Project Manager. It goes out here, Window, Package Manager, and in here we can, of course, in case of normal packages, we will have to go from in project registry to Unity registry in order to see the list of them and find them the ProGrids. But ProGrids package is not available in this list, so the only way for us to add it to our project is through plus button, add package by name, and only then we can write the registry, the com.unity.progrids. And then you click add, and it should be correctly installed to our project. Okay, so for now we can turn the package manager off, and we can see that already we have a new list of tools at the left side of our viewport. Down below there is a default Unity list of tools, and here we have a panel for controlling the progress option. If you can't see that, don't be afraid, we can open it up manually. For example, here, if we go to the menu bar, we have Tools button, open it up, then Progress unfolded, and over here we have Progress window. If you click on that, this toolbar should appear inside of the scene view. In my case it doesn't because it's already open, so if I close that, like close Progress, it should disappear, and I can open it again, Progress window. Okay, so now we can have a look at what exactly is happening here. What has changed? So in the scene, as you can see, everything looks exactly the same as it was before. Really nothing has really changed. But if we turn on the display of the guidelines, for example, the second button, which is grayed out for now, we can turn it on. You may already have it done. If you turn it on, you will see a grid. In this case, we have a new grid appearing in the Z-plane space of our world. We can change, of course, the axis on which the grid appears here, like Z is one active. If we change it to Y, as you can see, it just starts displaying another Y axis over our scene. And it's kind of better for me this way. For example, I don't like Z axis or X axis. They just look a little bit strange. So my personal preparation is to use Y-axis, but it's up to you. Of course, if you want, you can enable this 3D button. If you do that, you will see all three axes appearing in the same time. It obstructs the view too much. Probably it's not that comfortable to use the Unity scene right now if you see that everything here, but still you have the possibility, so it's just a matter of preferences. In my case, I will stick to Y-axis. Okay, so you might have already noticed that in case I have enabled our Y-axis, we will have the duplicates of those axes in our world. So right now, this is the default one, the Unity's axis, the white one, and the green one is from the ProGrids. So why do we have both of them visible at the same time? This is because by default, the option is enabled for us to change the dynamically placement of the grid, depending on selected objects. So for example, if I press on my camera, we can see that the grid changed its position. If I press on the light, it just got snapped to the light, so the 0, 0 coordinates are inside of the object that we have here. Or, for example, here, inside of the sky and fog volume. It could be, of course, turned off, this option, it goes here, this button, lock perspective, grid center in place. Yeah. If I turn it off, we can see that no matter what I select right now, the axis will right now be fixed to the middle of our coordinate system of our world. But of course, sometimes you might want to change the location of the grid. And of course, this tool, this package, allows you to do so. And of course, as you can see, as I turn it off, having my light selected, the grid right now stays in the same place as it was before, not in the 0, coordinate. So basically, if you want to have correct placement, you will have to place something in the middle, turn it off, and then it should stay the same. Pretty nice. For now, we have only observed these displays of guidelines or the grids for us to refer to. But where is exactly the functionality? What can we do with that? Of course, first of all, we can lock the grid so that anything we move, it will snap to our grid, depending on our settings. So, for example, let's create a cube, 3D object, cube, and it appears somewhere. I'll snap it back to the middle of our coordinate system. And right now, if I want to move that, we can see that I can still move our object. Yeah, the same as in the default view Unity. Yeah, nothing really changed. But if I turn this snapping option on, here it is off by default. If I turn it on and try to move our object right now, we can see that it starts to move depending on the grid and of course on the distance set in the settings. This distance I've just mentioned could be changed here. 0.5 means that each time I move, it got snapped to each subsequent 0.5 coordinate. Yeah, each half. So like from 0, 0.5, 1, 0.5, 2, etc., etc. Okay? Sometimes it may be desired effect. Sometimes you want to move by ones or by twos or by 0.25s. It is possible to change if you press here on this number, 0.5 for example, you can see a little window appearing with settings. So like changing snap value, for example, to 1, done, you can now change position of our cube only by moving it up to once. So in case you have model structure, yeah, and modular kits for level construction, it is quite easy. You can just paste it here and pretty easily snap it or copy it together, and they align perfectly fine here. Of course, in Unity you have this vertex alignment, but it's kind of problematic and tiresome to do that if you have a huge level, for example, to assemble. And here you can just move things up and everything gets snapped to the grid by default. So as we have already noticed, there are some more options here during the changes of settings. Yeah, the snap value is of course changes the distance by which each step the position of our object changes. Snap on scale, turning on, it means that if I, for example, have this cube, I can change its scale, and if I do, it will also snap to the grid. Yeah, of course, it may not be exactly the grid, and the scale will depend on the pivot point or the center. Now it's center option. Sometimes you will want to have pivot enabled, and probably if you are using modular kits, pivot option enabled here is the best approach, because center is calculated automatically and may not be the best placement, and of course may not fit the grid perfectly. So once again, if you change the scale and you have this scale snap on scale option enabled, you can change that depending on what is written here. So if I, for example, change it to 0.5 and now try to change the scale, it will not change like 2, 3, scale 1, but 0.5, yeah, 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, etc., etc. Yeah, so pretty easy to use that and pretty much comfortable. Okay, so the next option, the meaning of the next option may not be as crystal clear as on previous one. it calls snap as a group. What does that mean? So, for example, if I turn it off and try to move around our objects, like default, like it may be in our scene, for example, set it up like here, and for example, I want them all to be moved by a grid. So I can select all of them, and if I have snap as a group selected and turn the snapping on, if I try to move that, for example, I can change from pivot, yeah, because right now it will be changed or only by pivot movement. So one object stays on the grid, all others are somewhere between those points. So now if I move it, the first object that was on the grid stays there, and the other ones are just keeping offsets. And if I toggle it off, you can already notice that it starts to automatically snap other objects to the grid, not keeping the offset between those different cubes that we have here. Sometimes it's required to have such an effect, sometimes it is not, so just for you to decide whether you want to see that or not. For example, here right now, after I release the button and enable the movement again, we can see that everything sticks together. Alright, so then we have an angle field setting 45. It doesn't mean if I right now will rotate my cube, it will snap to 45 degrees. No, it doesn't. It still is the same as the default rotation. But what does this angle 45 mean? It means that if I will look at our object from the side, for example here, I can see that on the toolbar we have different set of options. We don't have those axes anymore. We have angle preview. If I toggle it on, we can see that right now, starting from the center of our screen, it snaps the center of this X somewhere close to where the center of our scene is. So right now, for example, if I do like that, I can see that I can, for example, rotate it, yeah, holding Control, or move it up, move it around, and somehow it should help me understand what are the position and what is the angle from the origin, for example. Actually, I never used that tool before. Have no idea really of practical examples where it can be useful. But still, in any cases, we can change this angles like 15, for example. Done. And as we can see right now, we have 15 angle X. Yeah? It just depends on you how you want to use that. Maybe you'll have more ideas than I do. Okay, so what else do we have? The last option is called predictive grid. It is actually pretty simple. If I turn it on, and for example I move an object, we can see that first of all nothing happens. If I try to move from the side, okay, right now if I move our camera down enough so I can, let's say, see our object from the side, predictive grid changes the display of our Y grid, which is the default which I've set up at the beginning, to the Z one. If I move it somewhere here, okay, it should change at some point to the X one. Does it? It does. Yeah, for some reason, only when I move it somewhere here. So once again, this is a matter of preferences, whether you want to use those tools, or the last mentioned tools or not. But mostly, the default tools that we have here, like snapping, setting this value, snapping on scale or the group, and of course turning off and on this snap rotations, etc., is perfectly fine and perfectly useful. For example, once again, for setting up the modular environment. So this is pretty much it about this tool. The functionality is pretty limited, just enabling us mostly to move our object on a scene, snapping it to the imaginary grid that we have, dynamically probably displacing it depending on our objects. Of course, Alone, this tool is not that useful, but for example, in combination with other prototyping tools, like ProBuilder, for example, it can show its all true potential. So, of course, we will have a look at that in the next video. So, if you found this video any helpful or interesting, give a like, post a comment, and of course, subscribe. So, thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.